That's right, friends. It's show 2 here on this delightful Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday. It's August 14th still. This show will be useful even past August 14th, believe it or not. And we will be joined in just a couple of moments by my good buddy Adam Stock, the man I call the PuntMaster. The PuntMaster. Because he is a punt master. That nickname hasn't caught on yet, but I'm going to keep working at it. He's Adam G. Stock on Twitter. We'll talk to him in just a matter of moments. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Vespris. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Vespris. You can also follow our network at Old Man Squad. It's an easy one. Old Man Squad. I want to try to get to 1,000 there as fast as possible. And it'll follow you back. If you're a real person, it'll follow you back. So, got that going for us, which is nice. Do take a moment here at the front end of the show. I'll remind you again, if you're watching the show, that's the one place where you can like it is on YouTube, and then subscribe everywhere. This is where my content is. Many of you didn't know this, and that's fine because it was the dead of the off season, but now I've started my own podcast network. It's called the Old Man Squad Sports Network. It's lots of different really cool shows. You can find them all through that Twitter feed I talked about. But also, if you want my fantasy content, this is the only place it is. So please subscribe, iTunes, Spotify, whatever, YouTube, and we'll get you all that stuff going on. Coming up here with Stock, I just call him by his last name. We got a bunch of Dans, we got a bunch of Adams in the fantasy community. I think we got a couple of Matts as well. Coming up with Stock, we're going to be talking about what the Yahoo board, this initial dump that Yahoo put out, has sort of schematically that leads him to particular punt builds, and then how you pull those off. We'll also get some of Adam's big winners on the board, the guys that you should be targeting based on their value spot. A couple of names that he thinks are absolutely atrocious at their current rank. And then, you know how a Dan show goes. This is entirely on me. We're going to go floating off into the wilderness, see where the universe takes us. Let's get into it, though. Let's talk to Adam because, look, it's really, he and I see eye to eye on a lot of stuff because we both attack percentages and turnovers more than your standard analyst. So you will see some overlap, but you're also going to see some really cool stuff that Adam does that I don't. That's why these guest shows are so important. Let's get into it right now. The Punt Master. Has anybody else started calling you that yet? Anybody?
Just my wife. It's okay.
Oh, there you go. That's we'll take it. Adam Stock, welcome back to the program. So before I give the little background on you, these are, and I say this like maximum honesty, these are some of the most interesting shows for me personally. I hope the listeners feel the same way because you see things in a different way, and I feel like I always get smarter. So first of all, thank you for carving out the time again. Second of all, Adam G. Stock on social, the punt master himself. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Okay, so I have a few things I want to get through on this one. We'll see how far we get. Everybody knows the Dan Vespris way is meandering off into the forest, and maybe we find our way back to the path. I don't know. But I want to talk a little bit of punt. I want to make sure you have some time to do a little promo also, which is very important. And then I want to get your thoughts on the first Yahoo board. But the punting stuff, and just to, again, a little bit of background here before I let you kind of monologue, soapbox, whatever comes next, is the last time that you and I spoke, or maybe it was 2 times back, I don't remember, you talked the listeners and myself through this concept of seeing the board that that your big box site, Yahoo, ESPN, whatever you're using to play your fantasy game, puts out, and understanding how that board translates to punt strategy. I don't think many people look at it from that perspective. I think a lot of folks see, oh, there's Giannis at 6. If I get the 6th pick, I'm punting free throws kind of thing. But I don't think a lot of people look beyond the first 25. And that was something you said that I felt was extremely illuminating, which, and you can again correct me if I'm paraphrasing this wrong, last season, the board had a cluster of traditional big men from like 50 to 65. You just had a glut of them right in the middle. And so you were able to look at that and say, I can build my punt around the fact that I'm probably going to get 2 traditional big men in the 4th, 5th, 6th round range. I don't need to deal with that stuff early. Am I paraphrasing correctly on that one from last year?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question then is, and I know this is going to be a complicated one, but I'm just really curious to hear how this, like, the board is out. Yahoo drops their board Friday of last week. You look at it. What does the punt master see when he's like, oh, this is where things are falling? This is a way that I think people can strategize towards a punt.
Yeah, sure. So I'll walk you through kind of my process first, just
Please.
so it makes a little more sense. The first thing I do when I'm getting my preseason content together is put together the projections. And then from there, I use those projections to figure out where each category is in the draft. I want to know the category scarcity situation for the year, because that's going to determine when we have to go after certain categories. And then once I know that, I can start thinking about whether or not that category scarcity situation is going to cause a certain build to be easier or harder to pull off. I'm not necessarily worried about specific players. It's more about the categories for now. Like, I will eventually drill down and get my favorite targets in each round, but I want to know, is there at least a chance to pull off the punt in the optimal way, or are we going to have to get creative? And like you mentioned earlier, punt free throw percentage is probably the most obvious example of that. To pull off a successful free throw percentage punt, you usually need to take something like 4 strong guards or perimeter players over the first 6 rounds, and then 2 strong bigs. If there's plenty of field goal percentage, rebounds, and blocks in the middle rounds, then it's pretty easy. Usually you take 3 guards with out of your first 4 picks, get an elite big, and you're usually good to go. But if there isn't a ton of field goal percentage, rebounds, and blocks in the middle rounds, then you got to get creative. It can get kind of messy. That was usually the case back in the day when we had guys like Drummond, Gobert, and DeAndre Jordan. Great punt free throw percentage assets, but they actually kind of made the build harder to pull off because you usually had to pick them in the second. So then you'd be taking this big hit in the guard categories. Versus these days where you can get guys in the middle rounds who do, let's say, 90% of what those guys do. They're not quite as good, but they're really good. But you get them at a 5th round price, and it just makes things way easier. So in terms of this year, I have noticed that we do have those bigs in the middle rounds again. Rounds 4, round 6 on Yahoo are big, heavy. On ESPN, I think it's 5 and 6. This will change, but probably not too much. Like, they should still end up in that range. So that's good to see for all the big, heavy builds like punt free throw percentage, punt threes, punt assists, but to a lesser extent. One thing I noticed this year, I'm not 100% sure of the impact yet because I haven't gotten into my team building stuff too much, is steals are really heavily concentrated in the early rounds this year. In the past, we always talk about points, assists, and free throw percentage, and that's all still true. You had to go after those categories hard early, but this year steals isn't too far off those guys. So in terms of
so when
builds,
you see that,
then I'm thinking, like, how does that impact each build? So I think, okay, punt assists, it's got a natural weakness in punt steals because assists and steals tend to be somewhat, not strongly correlated, but moderately correlated, at least in the past. That hasn't necessarily been the case the last 2 years, but historically it has been. And I think, okay, maybe that's a problem for punt assists, and it might be. I haven't done enough team building stuff to confirm or deny it, so I got to hold that back for the guides too. But stuff like that is what I'm looking at.
So you still see, I was looking at the board myself before we started the show, and it looked a little bit like the bigs in the middle rounds maybe got pushed. And you mentioned this for Yahoo, like instead of all being in the 5th round like last year, like half got pushed to the 4th and half got pushed to the 6th. That doesn't bother you that much?
No, it doesn't matter too much, just because usually I don't find there's usually a huge difference between the 4th and maybe the first half of the 5th, and then the 6th can definitely get messy. I remember last year there was like a huge drop off at the end of the 6th. We'll see once we start to get into the weeds a little more as preseason goes along, if that's still the case. Definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
Is there anything else you see clustered moving through a board that makes a different punt seem like a feasible alternative?
Yeah. I mean, the bigs really jump out. You're also looking at stuff like assists. Some years there's a bunch of assists in round 6 and 7 after you get that big point guard run around round 4. Is that going to be the case this year? There are some assists later, but I'm skeptical they'll stay in that range. You got guys like Amen, Chris Middleton, guys like that, like really low, where I don't think they're going to actually stay there.
Yeah,
so,
like
so the Yahoo rankings are kind of like a rough draft, especially after the top 100 right now. So we don't want to be too definitive with our predictions for the year. We got to see how things shake out.
The first look then, just to see if I want to make sure that I'm sort of clearing this up for myself and then for the listeners. The first look, when you looked at the board this year, you were like, I think free throw might be the path again.
Just big man builds in general. Like I love punt threes too, and the same kind of holds, because you still need to go, even if you're doing a big man heavy build, you still need to get those guard categories. Does
one thing shape which direction you go between free throw or threes or both? What do you look for in that respect?
Giannis, maybe Luka. so it's the starting points in general. In a bubble, I like punt threes more. It gives you a little more flexibility, because punt free throw, you kind of get locked into it. While punt threes, you can always just find some, like you'll have 2.5 threes per game guys popping up all the time. I've switched from punt threes to non-punt threes and back punt threes in mid-season before. You can't really do that with punt free throw percentage unless you're moving your core pieces.
Yeah, that's true. So really, at that point, it kind of comes down to what pick you get in a snake draft.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. This is super awesome. I can't wait to hear how this develops for you over the next few weeks, especially as Yahoo adjusts their board. This makes my brain tingle. I know that it's like not maybe the YouTube friendliest of podcast topics, because we're not hammering through names rapid fire, but I feel like this is the kind of thing that can make people see the board differently, to say, maybe I should be looking for my team build. I don't know. Did you watch Silicon Valley on HBO?
No, I haven't. I've heard good things, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah, it was funny. I mean, it tapered as it went, but the whole concept is like this made up concept of this middle out compression algorithm that he creates that changes the way everybody looks at compression in data, etc. I feel like you're doing a little bit of that middle out in the way you.
I think you're gassing me up a little too much, but I appreciate it.
No, I mean, like, not to say that you've like created something that never existed before, but you're looking at a different part of the board than I think most people look at when they're contemplating how they build a punt team. I think that part is very true. And I think that's what I want folks' takeaway to be when you're talking about this, in addition to obviously finding the right fit, the right players, but just not getting so locked into, oh, I have the 9th pick, I have to do this. It can be, oh, I have the 9th pick, here are my options based on guys I'm going to get in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, because you have a better opportunity. And maybe I'm extrapolating too far, but do you agree or disagree that you have more choices at pick 40 than you do at pick 9? Like, you can just grab whoever on the board at 40. At pick 9, you're not going to go much beyond like the top 15.
Yeah, for sure. Basically, what I do with the guides is I'm creating like a decision tree for you. Like if you start here, like these are your options here, and that means what this is what it means in this round. So yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely I'm looking at the big picture. I'm trying to keep the big picture in mind throughout the entire draft. Maybe not the later rounds, because that's just all about upside. But right. Definitely when you're building your core, like you want to be thinking big picture the entire time.
Okay, we've got your strategy or your initial punt look at the board. We're going to get into the players you like and dislike on the Yahoo board. Before we do that, again, talking to Adam G. Stock. That's the social. His name is just Adam if you want to talk to him by first name. Let's do some promo in the middle of the show. People tune it out if you do it at the end. But right now, they got to wait to hear your value plays. So what are you working on these days, and where can everybody find it?
We're getting pretty close to launch day for Elite Fantasy Basketball. Usually it's going to be probably last week of August. I've already got my projections done, my top 150 done. Just going to pump out my punt assist guide and punt field goal percentage guide, and then go live. And then all the other punt guides will follow. Pairing guides, got a lot of stuff coming that you won't necessarily find anywhere else. And if you do find it anywhere else, it probably won't be as detailed. A lot of these are pretty, like, they're monster guys. They're 10,000 word guys with sample teams, whole bunch of different options broken down in a very detailed way for each round. If you haven't visited the site before, I suggest maybe checking out the free punting guide I put out last year. It's pinned on my Twitter account. That kind of gives you an idea of what is to come. I'm always looking to improve and tweak things, so it won't be a one-for-one deal. But that gives you an idea of the type of analysis that's going to be available on the site. in a couple weeks.
EliteFantasyBasketball.com, the website, again, at Adam G. Stock on Twitter. All right, where should we head next? You want to go to somebody you like or somebody you hate on the board?
Let's stay positive. Let's stay positive.
Fair. Who do you like?
Also, because I want to hype my guy Fred VanVleet, who
is
going way too low for the millionth year in a row. I don't really understand the ranking, but I think it does kind of reflect the sentiment around him too. Like Fred ended up like 17th, I think, in 9-cat last year, first round in punt field goal percentage. To me, should be a clear second round player. It's not super sexy because the PPG isn't high, but I mean, he's been a very similar player for a handful of years now. I don't see why that would change. This year, Houston does have a little more depth, but he's still the guy, probably the most important player on the team. Not necessarily the best, but probably the most important player on the team. So he's going to play a million minutes again, probably put up a similar line. His steals came back over the second half of the season. That was probably just a defensive system switch. He was also getting a weird amount of blocks that were really steals, but were getting counted as blocks. I think a lot of those started to get counted as steals by the end of the year. So Fred is an obvious one. He'll be really high in my rankings. Who else we got?
About Fred, and we can go to the next one in a minute. Fred was one of those guys. His pre-rank was like late 20s, early 30s last year, and I didn't have him on my board. But then the last 2 weeks before the season started, his ranking slipped to like 40, and all of a sudden I had like 9 or 10 cash teams last season, and I think I had VanVleet on 7 or 8 of them. Like, what was he doing at 40?
He was like my go-to guy last year because in my personal rankings, I had him like 17th. And he was going, like 40. So it's like, this is perfect. This is the dream scenario, essentially.
Yeah, that one's a traditional. I feel like you're just trying to butter me up with that one. A traditional old man selection. But I know you and I do see eye to eye on some of this stuff because you also, like me, we value percentages, I think, more than most as a way. And not having the world's worst turnovers, just ways to sort of steal categories in head-to-head. Or Roto collecting a ton of points in these is also
and I love those guys who you can punt a category and really juice their value. Like there's more balanced guys and they don't really necessarily receive a big jump in any build. Like a guy like Ant Edwards, like he needs to make a big jump this year, but there also isn't a build that really just boosts him like 2 rounds. But with Fred, you can make him elite by punting field goal percentage. And there's not too many guys who are like that.
Yeah, especially guys that you can get around to 2 rounds behind where they ended up
last
year.
You can get a first round punt field goal percentage guy in like the 3rd or 4th. That's amazing.
Yeah, with no like marked change in what his role is set to be this coming year. In any event, okay, where do you want to go next?
I guess for early rounds, I guess we can talk Don Mitch. I think he's an easy first rounder for me. I just think his ceiling is so high. He's been phenomenal the last 2 years. Yeah, I got beat up last year, but it wasn't anything long-term. Just seemed fluky to me. I love him at the end of the first. If we're talking end of the first, Harden at 25 seems off to me. I'm still not 100% sure what I want to do there, but I think I'm going to have him top 15. I don't trust Kawhi to play nearly as many games this year. And if Kawhi's out, it's going to be like him, Norm Powell, and Zubac. So like the path to big numbers is pretty clear, I think. And then speaking of that, Kawhi at 46, why not? I mean, range, go for it. Yeah. I'm not a Kawhi guy at all, but at 46, I am.
Yeah. I thought after Kawhi had a 68-game season and was like number 6 by totals last year, I thought for sure this would be a season where you saw his pre-rank at least hold steady, maybe even increase a little with Paul George being gone. And instead, his pre-rank last year was like 25. He's 20 slots deeper after being a massive win last season. I was doing the numbers yesterday. I think he only needs to play in like 54 games this year to get to his value by totals. That's not asking that much.
Yeah, I think the playoffs and Olympics spook people, but I mean, he always gets hurt in the playoffs, so it's not like that different, really.
It's true.
Really? Yeah. So there's guys like that, like Levine later too, kind of similar setup. Bad season last year, but the price is so low. There's no downside to it, and quite a bit of upside. Beal I don't love, but yeah, similar.
80 something. I mean, he's in the 80s. It's
80 something.
Like, this wasn't a guy I was intending to target, but then he's like 30 spots later than I
agree. You'll like this guy too, Tobias. I'm always Tobias guy.
He is my favorite player on the whole freaking board. And I know that says a lot about me and probably a lot of things that I don't want said about me. But what the hell is he doing in the 80s? Adam, can you explain this?
I don't know. I think just I think because Philly fans hated him so much, just the situation surrounding him made people who weren't paying too close attention think he was worse than he was last year. He was pretty good last year. Obviously, that was helped by the Embiid injury, but now he's going to Detroit where there's no Embiid. There's Cade, who isn't a crazy high usage guy, and then who? Like, we
Nobody.
don't know. Nobody. Him.
Yeah, him.
So I think top 50 is pretty likely. I think they're going to be so bad where it's not necessarily a lock that they'll need to shut him down late. It definitely could happen, but I'm not too worried at that price.
Yeah, I'm not even the tiniest bit worried at that price.
Yeah,
like at that one, I don't care at all. So I'm on board with almost every old person that you listed, and almost all those dudes were old people. My only fear out of all the players you listed was Donovan Mitchell's health, because it really hasn't been good in like the last 2 to 3 years now. Do you think we can get him to like 65 games this season? Because the per game is well ahead of the ADP, but like the totals last year were, I think, in the 30s. So he was behind it. It was that health thing. Do you have confidence he can get there on the health side?
Decent. I mean, I don't think he's too much riskier than most of the guys in that range. Like the late first is mostly guys who will be happy if they play 65. And I think he's got more per game upside than a lot of those guys. And I also don't think too many of the injuries are super concerning. Like there's nothing that's going to carry over. It just seems like one-offs. Like it's not great when a player gets beat up all the time. It's a small guard, so you got to factor that in. But I'll take that upside. Like at the end of the first, I'm chasing per game upside for the most part. I'm willing to take some risk because I don't want to be facing the Jokic team in the playoffs with the 15th best player on a per game basis. No disrespect to Jason Tatum, but that's a situation that I don't feel comfortable about. Like I view taking low upside players at the end of the first is kind of risky too, just in a different way.
Yeah, because it's hard to get over that hurdle. I might help you. I mean, head to head, I think that and Roto have pretty different discussions there. But the head to head guy, someone like that, maybe they sort of carry you to a decent record throughout the year. You have to do some tweaks along the way. With Roto, it's hard to make up that ground if you don't have a top guy to give you those massive stats every time they go out there all season long. So totally on board with that. You mentioned both prime Clippers in your discussion as well, in both Harden and Kawhi. How do you feel about the rest of the Clippers? Is anybody else going to do anything? I'm pretty high on Zubats this year, actually.
Yeah, he's the guy. When I'm putting together my projections, I'm like, I don't see how Zubac doesn't have a big year. Like they just have to use him more. They'll probably play him more. The backup center position is weaker this year. Mo Bamba's not really a clear rotation level guy versus Plumlee. Plumlee had a bad year last year, but he's better than Bamba still. So I'm pretty certain he's going to be a nice pick this year, and he fits a lot of builds really nice. Just because he's your classic big man. He's another guy you can juice with a punt of a guard category, and all of a sudden he's top 60, and you can get him probably just outside of the top 100. That's probably fair. So Zubac I like a lot. Norm's 2 categories could definitely be relevant. I'm not crazy over man. I just don't like the fit of his game. For category leagues, probably will play a lot, but I don't think he'll be all that useful. Might be a 13th man, but I'm not too interested.
Yep, I'm with you on that one. You're once again steering the ship. Where do you want to go next?
I guess we'll still be positive. I mean, my guy Big Yak at 108, he's still really good. It's just like last year he got hurt, so we didn't get to see him play with the new version of the Raptors. We did get a small sample size, and it was really good. And the minutes weren't great, but they were using him a lot more. So he's probably going to still be like a mid-round guy that you can get late. There's probably some trade risks there because he's on a very cheap contract. Probably get some interest around the league, but I don't like banking on trades too much. Like we've been saying, Clint Capella was going to get traded for like 3 years now, and it hasn't happened. I think it will probably happen this year because of his contract. But I don't know. Clint's making $22 million. Does someone want that at their center spot? Especially they don't want that as backup. So how many starting centers spots are available? So yeah, there's some risk with Pirtle, but I mean at that price, I'm in.
What would okay? I mean, I know I'm steering in a different direction. Yeah. What do you do about the Hawks center situation? Is it finally Okongwu year? Because his price is so low this season.
I'm still trying to figure that out. So those are two of the guys I'm done like 135 of my top 150 write-ups, and I've left the Hawks center spot, both of them, because I'm not 100% sure, because I write the with when you're talking about Okongwu, I always feel like the boy who cried wolf, because it's like, yeah, like this could be the year, but like we have no idea.
Yeah. No,
we have no idea. Like the Hawks aren't going for a full like rebuild. They still got Trey. Like their wing rotation is pretty young. They're almost certainly going to make the play in because of how weak the East is. So it's not a lock that they swap spots.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny that after all these years of like, this is Okongwu time, finally it does kind of seem like the universe is giving up, because his pre-rank is 160 something.
Yeah. For like at that price, like automatic
right.
pick. But I doubt that will stick too.
You think he moves? Do you think people start to believe again this year? It kind of feels like everyone's like, fine, it's never happening. This is the give up year, like the John.
Yeah, I think it will move to like 120 or something like that. The problem is, like, if he shows any signs like of life in preseason, or if he's playing the floor a little more, then he'll jump too.
Yeah, good point. That's fair. So back to Toronto. Is what kind of production do you think you can get out of Poeltl in, say, 26 minutes a ball game? Where would that get him?
Yeah, that was about what he was playing after OG and Siakam. So, and he was like 12-9 and over a block and a half, just because they were using him more. Like it felt like he was a bigger part of the defense and offense. So I think like in punt freely percentage, he'll still be a mid-round player for sure. In other builds, always tough to say, because it's whether or not you want to take on that hit, the freely percentage hit, because it's pretty significant. But he'll be a better assist source than a lot of those traditional type bigs. Like he can't shoot, but he can pass quite a bit. They'll probably run a little more offense through him this year. So something in the range of like 11, 12, and 9, and a block and a half plus his field goal percentage impact is enormous. There's a lot to like there.
What do you think about the rest of the Raptors while I've got you here?
Yeah. I like quickly a lot. I'm still trying to figure out, do I like him in the 6th, or do I like him in the 5th? I just worry, like, the hype is obvious, the opportunity is obvious, but are we going to start pricing him at his ceiling? I think Yahoo's got him around the end of the 4th, which feels like his ceiling to me. I do like him quite a bit, but we'll have to see what the price is. Barrett looks better in Toronto, but he also shot like 80% from the field while he was with Toronto, which is obviously not sustainable. Probably just a late round guy, and he also shot like 60% from the line. It was a really kind of like, he looked better, but it was, from a fantasy standpoint, it was a weird stretch. Just that he is who he is. He'll probably be a slightly better version of what he was in New York,
right?
But he's just a points league guy. Scotty worries me a bit. Just that block rate doubled last year, and how real is that? Stuff like that is related to defensive systems, which makes it kind of hard to project. Like, will he have as many rim protection opportunities this year? I mean, Poeltl might play a little more. Will probably play in more games. But then on the other side, maybe this guy is just one of the league's future top 10 guys, and he just keeps going. So he's a hard guy to project, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, it could go either direction. You want to give me one or two negatives before we send you off? I mean, we got to clown on someone, right?
Yeah, I mean, Ant at 10, that's goofy. That'll be talked about a ton.
No, you know what? Actually, hold on. Because I actually think that I thought this one was super obvious also, and we agree on this one, but the universe disagrees, because in all of the stuff that I've done on social, people's initial response is like, I want Ant there. And I was like, my response is, why? Maybe you can explain this better than I can? Because, I mean, you already talked about it earlier in the show. He's not a punt guy. So it's not like you take him at 10 because he can be this massive leap forward if you're punting category X. He's like decent to better than decent in basically everything across the board. So what is it that, do you know what people are seeing here that I'm not? Is it just the durability thing? Because like anybody can turn an ankle.
Yeah, I think people are overreacting to playoff runs. You always got to be careful about guys who go off for a round or two, even if they're as talented as Ant. Like, that's obvious with role players, but with the top guys too, the playoffs are so matchup based. You look at Phoenix and Denver. It's not really surprising that Ant had good series against them. They have no rim protection, and they didn't have anyone who could really match up with them. And then he goes against Dallas. It was a ton of rim protection. They got a lot of length, and he struggles. It's not really a coincidence. You can't read too much into a sample size of a dozen games. And then, of course, it's just like he's a likable guy. The league's pushing him as one of the faces. That's always going to have an impact. I mean, before Josh started getting into trouble, he was way too high, and that was a lot of that was just like the marketing the league was pushing. So there's that side, but the per game side, yeah, I mean, he was like top 35, top 40 guy last year in 9-cat, bump him up around in 8-cat. Still not a great pick there. I know some people are projecting that he's going to make this big leap in scoring, but how's that going to happen? Yeah, that requires Towns to stop, to lose a ton of usage, which he's not going to. Towns is still a great offensive player who deserves quite a few touches. I just don't see the path. When I put together my projections, I try to do a quick best case scenario and worst case scenario. And yeah, there's paths to the second round on a per game basis for Ant, but there's really no path to the top 10 that doesn't involve Towns going down on night one.
Yeah, please knock on something. Not that I want a lot of Karl Anthony Towns on my fantasy teams either, but I also don't want to see him go down on night one. I'd like to see Minnesota do okay this year. Give me one more guy that you think is going way too early, and then I promise to let you go.
Should I make it obvious? Because I mean, Banchero at 37 is ridiculous.
Give me one that's less obvious. I'll put you on the spot.
Is Kobe White less obvious enough?
Yeah, that's less obvious enough.
Okay, yeah. Kobe White. I mean, last year he took a big leap, but the overall value wasn't amazing. I think most people thought he was like a top 50 guy when he wasn't really, just because some of the holes in his line, his field goal percentage, his steals, and then this year he's got Giddey to worry about. Looks like Alonzo's in decent shape. Probably not going to play a ton, but if he's in the rotation, that hurts. It's going to be off ball more. Assist rate's going to go down. And the big thing for me is probably not going to play as much. He was playing close to 37 minutes a game last year, and that will make any player look good. You put him at 33, 34. That's a couple rounds. A value lost. He's going in the 80s. Probably won't be a top 100 per game guy this year unless guys go down.
Is there a build where he would make more sense?
Punt steals, but punt steals is not the best build in the world. And you could argue punt field goal percentage as well, but a million guards fit that build. So I wouldn't say White is a particularly attractive guy in any build, especially at his price. If he was 110, sure, I'd take him. 80 something, no.
Last question. Sorry, I know I promised that was done, and then I'm gonna sneak in one more. Is there a first round pick you would end up with that would steer you into a punt steals idea?
I mean, you could do that with Steph for sure.
Although you might be able to get Steph in the second round this year, by the way.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I think he'll probably settle around 11, 12, but you could maybe get him in the second round. Yeah, Steph, you could definitely do that with Tatum. But the thing with Tatum is why wouldn't you just do punt assists or punt field goal percentage,
right,
or something instead? Punt steals just doesn't change the board that much. It gives bigs a big boost, but so do a lot of other builds that do switch the board around a lot more. So for me, punt steals is always just, it's like a mid-round pivot. Oh crap, I didn't get enough swipes early, and it's round 6, and there aren't a ton of steals guys late, the steals guys lates are specialists, and I don't want to take all these hits everywhere. So it's maybe in that situation I'll punt steals, but I rarely go into the draft being I want to punt steals. Like with Steph, Steph, you can punt almost anything with him, really. So it's never going to be near the top of my list, even though he's a nice fit for that setup.
I have about 20 more questions, but I'm going to save them for next time. At Adam G Stock on Twitter, EliteFantasyBasketball.com. That is dropping, you said, in probably the next week or two. You type a lot. I hope that your carpal tunnel situation is good. You got any tingling right now? Or are you good?
It's okay. Ask me in March. I might give you a different answer.
Yeah, stay healthy. Do some calisthenics. Stay healthy over there. Adam, thank you so much, my man. We'll I'm gonna bug you again soon, whether you like it or not.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Dan. These are always a lot of fun.
Adam G Stock, ladies and gentlemen, realized I didn't have my headphones in appropriately there. Now I can yell it again. Second time, Adam G Stock. on Twitter. Adam Stock, the PuntMaster. He said, like, don't hype him up, and that's fine. He is but a man. However, I do think he gives us a different way of looking at the board, specifically when it comes to the idea of punting. It's not just, oh, I have the 6th pick, so I might get Giannis this year. It's, here are ways that I can build it with Shea, with whoever, but what's the easiest ones to pull off on any given year? Well, that has to do with where a lot of the other names on the board are falling. And we'll check in with Adam throughout the draft season. We'll try to talk to him at least once in September and once more in October, maybe more often than that. We'll see how the calendar shakes itself out. Just about how the Yahoo board is moving. Does that change some of the players that he's looking at that can potentially create a new punt strategy, or is it just a good time to punt guard stuff these days? Punt threes, punt free throw. Everybody and their mother is punting turnovers and field goal percent these days, so it is a little bit of a pivot the other direction. The only folks that are consistently punting free throw is whatever team ends up with Giannis, but you can still compete with that team even if you don't have Giannis in the first round. It doesn't end the competition. It's not, oh, he got Giannis, I can't punt free throws anymore. Or, again, you could go the 3-ball direction. Adam and I, not surprisingly, do see eye to eye on a lot of the other possible values on the board, largely because certain guys just get overlooked for being old or the type of basketball they play or whatever. Again, not massive surprises in terms of where he and I were kind of coming together. I like that he brought up Toronto. We haven't talked a ton about the Raptors on the podcast to date, and we can probably spend some more time on that. And some of that is because Toronto is one of the 7 teams we haven't done a team preview of so far. Coming up on the rest of the week here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Before we do that, again, drop a follow over on Adam. Drop a follow on myself at Dan Vespers, at Old Man Squad. Those are the 2 important Twitter feeds for me. Also, like, rate, subscribe. If you made it this far and you didn't do it the first time I asked you, please do it now. Like the video on YouTube, subscribe, however you're taking in the podcast. That continues to be the single most important set of things that anybody can do to let people know. Because I had actually a handful of people reach out in the last 24 hours that were like, Dan, I didn't even know you started your own network. I'm like, well, I'm like yelling about it all the time on Twitter, but if you're not on there, and I sent some emails out to people that I'd corresponded to over the years, and if you're not one of those, then there wasn't really an easy way for me to say, see you later on the old feed, because we didn't have a last YouTube show on the Sports Ethos account before I ventured off to do my own thing. So hopefully all of you guys hitting like, all of you guys hitting subscribe, that's going to bump it into different feeds and people are going to keep finding it. That is very important. Now, I'll tell you what's coming up the rest of the week. Tomorrow, Thursday, we're going to talk to Dan Titus at Yahoo Fantasy Basketball. We'll get some more information on when mock drafts are opening, his thoughts on the initial board, what role he had in them, where he sees value among them. That should be a lot of fun. We always have a good chat when Dan is around. Because, look, you can't do better than multiple Dans on the same program. Let's be perfectly honest here. You want to max out your Dans. Also tomorrow, one of 2 things. I got my hands on a real draft board from an 8-cat Roto League. We might break that down. That could be a lot of fun. We might also do 51 through 75 on the Yahoo board myself. I haven't done that video yet. So one of those 2 things will likely be our other show on Thursday. Also, the great Josh Lloyd is hosting a mock draft tomorrow that I'll be a part of, and I'll have some information on how that goes by the end of tomorrow as well. More stuff to talk about for Friday, for the weekend, whatever. We're also talking to Josh Lloyd on the podcast on Friday afternoon. So a lot of really good stuff coming up here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate Adam Stock for carving out some time in the middle of his day to jump on the show. And we wrap it up. See you tomorrow. Yeah, no more shows today. We're done for Wednesday. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you in, let's see, what do we got here? 10 hours, another, like 18 hours, something like that. 19. Later.